What if one decision by a small northern nation just changed the entire military balance of Europe forever? Finland has shut its 1,340-kilometer border with Russia, not temporarily, not as a warning, indefinitely. And what that means for Putin's army, his nuclear bases, and his dreams of pushing west is something most people haven't fully understood yet. Stay with me, because this story goes much deeper than a fence. If this kind of deep geopolitical breakdown is what you're here for, hit that subscribe button right now and ring the bell. And if you know someone who needs to understand what's really happening in Europe, share this video with them today. It takes 2 seconds, and it genuinely matters. Let's start with the geography, because without it, none of this makes sense. Finland shares one of the longest land borders in all of Europe with Russia. 1,340 kilometers. That's roughly the distance from London to Rome. For decades, this border was one of the most active crossing corridors in the entire continent. Trucks, travelers, trade, thousands of crossings every single day. 8 official border crossing points stretched across this long land, from Raja Giuseppe in the far north, all the way down to Vaalimaa in the south. And then, on June 4th, Finland made a decision that shook the foundations of European security. Every single one of those crossing points was slammed shut. No vehicles, no people, no exceptions. All 8 points closed. To understand why this is such a massive deal, you have to understand who Finland is and what Russia has done to it before. This is not a country that acts out of panic. Finland is precise, measured, and deeply strategic. It has survived as a small nation next to a massive, aggressive neighbor for centuries, and it has learned its lessons the hard way. Go back to 1939. The Soviet Union, under Stalin, launched a full-scale invasion of Finland. This became known as the Winter War. The Soviets expected it to be quick. It wasn't. Finland fought back with extraordinary courage against an army that was many times larger. But despite the resistance, Finland ultimately lost ground. When the war ended in 1940, Finland had been forced to give up roughly 9% of its territory. That included Karelia, Vyborg, and several other regions that were home to hundreds of thousands of Finnish citizens. Around 420,000 Finnish people were displaced. They left behind their farms, their towns, their family histories. They walked away from lands their families had lived on for generations. That wound never fully healed. It became part of Finland's national identity. The memory of what happened when you trust that your neighbor won't attack you. That memory is exactly why Finland joined NATO in April 2023. And that memory is exactly why Finland closed this border. Because here's what was happening before the closure. Russia had been quietly but aggressively building up its military presence along the Finnish border for years. Intelligence estimates suggest that between 5,000 and 10,000 Russian soldiers were deployed in the border region. That's not a border patrol, that's a forward presence. And it wasn't just troops. Russia had been using what security analysts call hybrid tactics. These are operations that don't look like war, but function like it. One of the most bizarre examples was the bicycle migration tactic. The Russian intelligence service, the FSB, was allegedly organizing groups of migrants to cross into Finland and other Nordic countries on bicycles. It sounds almost absurd, but the goal was calculated. Flood European border regions with asylum seekers, overwhelm local systems, generate social tension, and destabilize the target country from within without firing a single bullet. Finland saw exactly what was happening, and it responded with something Russia didn't expect: absolute clarity. No more crossings, no more corridors, no more entry points for hybrid operations to slip through. But closing the border was only the first layer of this strategy. What Finland built on top of that closure is where things get genuinely impressive. Along strategically selected sections of the border, Finland has been constructing a physical barrier system that stretches approximately 200 kilometers. These are not ordinary fences. They stand 4.5 meters high. They are lined with razor wire. But the real capability isn't in the steel. It's in what's embedded within it. Thermal imaging sensors that work in complete darkness, autonomous motion detectors that can track movement through dense forest, high-powered speaker systems, night vision cameras feeding live footage directly to a command center in Helsinki. This system is so sensitive that it can detect a fox moving through the trees half a kilometer away and immediately alert the appropriate response unit. This is not a wall in the traditional sense. It's a digital nervous system stretched across the wilderness. Every movement, every vibration, every heat signature gets logged, analyzed, and acted upon in real time. And backing up that barrier is a military force that has been quietly transforming itself into one of the most ready and capable in Europe. Finland's border guard units, known as Rajavartiosto, have been equipped with advanced drones and thermal tracking systems. Patrols have been significantly intensified. Behind the fence line, logistical vehicles and heavy military equipment have been pre-positioned at key points, ready to respond to any scenario almost instantly. But perhaps the most significant part of Finland's military posture is something that doesn't get talked about enough. Its reserve army. Finland has one of the largest reserve military forces in all of Europe relative to its population. When fully mobilized, Finland can put close to 280,000 trained soldiers in the field. These are not raw recruits. These are civilians who have completed mandatory military service and continue regular combat training. Finland has been accelerating that training program. Thousands of reservists are currently being cycled through updated combat scenarios specifically designed to counter modern hybrid and conventional threats. And then there's the NATO dimension. Finland is no longer defending this border alone. As part of NATO's enhanced forward presence strategy, multinational troops from alliance member states are now stationed on Finnish soil. This means that any Russian military action against Finland wouldn't just trigger a Finnish response. It would trigger a NATO response from 32 nations. That changes the calculation entirely. Now let's talk about what this means for Russia, because the effects go far beyond a closed fence. The military infrastructure Russia had been building near the Finnish border is now effectively neutralized as an offensive tool. Let's look at the specifics. The Leningrad military district, which Russia reorganized and reinforced specifically to operate on its northwestern axis, is now squeezed into a strategic corner. One of its most critical assets is the Petrozavodsk garrison, located approximately 160 kilometers from the Finnish border. Russia had been building this up as the headquarters of the new 44th Army Corps, with a planned capacity of around 15,000 soldiers. Tent camps, logistics depots, fuel storage, ammunition reserves, all of it has been painstakingly constructed over the past few years. That entire buildup was based on one assumption, that the border would remain permeable, that troops and supplies could move freely across that corridor when the moment came. That assumption is now dead. The 44th Army Corps is still there, but its operational flexibility has been slashed. The logistics chain that was supposed to feed it westward is severed. The intelligence access points that relied on border permeability are gone. The garrison is, in the most practical sense, cut off from the direction it was designed to project force toward. Now let's go further north. In the Murmansk region, Russia has stationed a new artillery brigade near Kandalaksha. This was intended to serve as a pressure point on Finland's northern flank. It is now an isolated force with no pathway west. Whatever pressure it was designed to apply has been neutralized before it was ever used. And then there's the Kola Peninsula. This is perhaps the most strategically significant piece of real estate in all of Russia's north. It is home to the Northern Fleet's nuclear submarine bases. Some of the most powerful weapons on Earth are housed there. Russia has always relied on the geographic depth of its northwestern flank as a buffer zone between those submarines and any potential NATO threat. Finland's NATO membership, combined with this border closure, has dramatically compressed that buffer zone. The Severomorsk Air Base, supporting the Northern Fleet, and the Olenia Air Base, where Russia stations its strategic bombers, are now under the constant surveillance gaze of Finland's advanced intelligence network. These facilities, which Russia considered to be well within its own protected strategic depth, are now observable, trackable, and within striking range of NATO's long-range systems. Russia's nuclear deterrence doctrine in the north, sometimes referred to internally as the bastion concept, which centers on protecting nuclear capability at all costs, is now facing a level of exposure it was never designed to withstand. This is a significant psychological and strategic blow. Before we go further, let's take a moment. If you've made it this far, you're clearly someone who wants to actually understand what's happening in the world, not just see the headlines. So do this. Drop a comment below with one word that describes what you think Putin is feeling right now. Just one word. Let's see what this community comes up with. And while you're down there, make sure you've liked this video. It genuinely helps more people find content like this. Now let's zoom out from the military specifics and look at the broader strategic picture, because Finland's move didn't just affect Russia. It accelerated a fundamental transformation across all of Scandinavia. Sweden and Norway have both been watching the Finland situation closely, and they have been drawing their own conclusions. The result is a regional security integration unlike anything seen in Northern Europe since the Cold War. The Nordic countries are now moving toward what defense planners are calling Fortress Nordic, a unified defense architecture that merges their military industries, supply chains, and operational planning under a coordinated structure. Under the umbrella of NORDEFCO, the Nordic Defense Cooperation Framework, Norway, Sweden, and Finland have begun joint arms procurement programs in 2026. CV-90 armored infantry vehicles and next-generation CAVs wheeled armored personnel carriers are being standardized across all three armies. This means interoperability. It means these armies can fight together seamlessly, share ammunition, share spare parts, share tactics. This is not a soft diplomatic gesture. This is hard military integration. And the geography of it is remarkable. Finland's border closure has physically cut Russia's land connection to any potential hybrid operation running deep into Scandinavia. Previously, Russia could theoretically use a border crisis in Finland to generate secondary pressure on Sweden and Norway. That leverage is gone. In its place, Finland now functions as a massive physical shield, separating Russia from the interior of the Nordic region. And the alliance has built a supply corridor to take advantage of that shield. Military equipment arriving at Norway's deep water ports can now move through Sweden and reach Finland's defense lines without ever touching the Baltic Sea. This overland artery is protected, efficient, and not vulnerable to Russia's naval harassment in the Baltic. Sweden's strategic island of Gotland, positioned in the middle of the Baltic Sea, is becoming heavily fortified as a result. Sweden has significantly increased its conscription numbers, its defense budget, and its military investment on Gotland, deploying air defense systems and Leopard 2 main battle tanks to what is now being called the unsinkable aircraft carrier of the Baltic. American strategic bombers have even landed at the Luleå Kallax Air Base in northern Sweden, sending an unmistakable signal to Moscow about how seriously the alliance takes deterrence in this region. Norway has matched this energy. The Bardufoss Air Base, dormant for years, has been reactivated and equipped with F-35 fighter jets, positioned in hardened mountain hangars. A new NATO Air Command Center established at Bodo now coordinates the entire Northern European airspace from a single hub, creating a seamless air defense picture that gives Russian jets no space to probe, test, or intimidate. Britain has also stepped in, committing to double its specially trained troop presence in Norway over the next 3 years. When you step back and look at all of this together, what you're seeing is something that hasn't existed in this form before. A militarily unified, technically sophisticated, deeply motivated Northern European security bloc that is no longer reacting to Russian threats, it is preempting them. Russia used to be able to keep these countries individually off balance, pressure Finland on the border, rattle Sweden in the Baltic, test Norway in the Arctic. The divide and pressure strategy. That strategy depends on the countries being separate enough to be pressured separately. Finland's border closure is the final nail in that approach. These countries are no longer separate in any meaningful military sense. Now, let's be honest about what Russia still has to work with, because underestimating Moscow is always a mistake. Putin is not someone who accepts strategic setbacks quietly. The Kremlin's military doctrine has always been built on the ability to adapt, to find asymmetric paths when direct routes are blocked. And there are several such paths that Russia is likely already exploring. The first and most obvious is the maritime dimension. Russia's shadow fleet in the Baltic, cargo and oil ships that appear civilian on radar but carry intelligence equipment and potentially sabotage tools, has been steadily expanding. The Baltic sea floor is crisscrossed with critical undersea data cables and energy pipelines. These are vulnerable, difficult to protect at every point, and enormously damaging if disrupted. Severing a single major cable could knock out communications across multiple countries simultaneously. Russia has shown it is willing to use these tactics, most notably in the Baltic Connector pipeline incident in 2023. Expect more of this. The Shadow Fleet will likely increase its activity now that land routes are sealed. The second vector is electronic and cyber warfare. Russia has significant capability in GPS jamming, which directly threatens civil aviation. In regions near the Finnish and Estonian borders, there have already been documented cases of GPS disruption affecting commercial flights. Russia can escalate this without ever crossing a physical border. Cyber attacks targeting hospitals, banking systems, and power grids in Finland and Sweden are well within Russia's capability and entirely within the pattern of behavior it has already demonstrated in Ukraine and the Baltic states. The third area is the Arctic. Norway and Russia share a border in the far north, and the Svalbard archipelago, a Norwegian territory under a unique international treaty that allows Russian citizens to live and work there, remains a potential flashpoint. Russia has long eyed Svalbard as a place to test NATO's Article 5 commitment with low visibility hybrid operations. Expect Russian submarine activity in the Norwegian Sea and the Barents Sea to intensify as the land option in Finland disappears. And then there's the nuclear theater. With the New START treaty expired and no replacement in sight, Russia has no formal treaty limiting the number of nuclear warheads it can deploy in the region. The Kola Peninsula's nuclear capacity could be increased not as a genuine warfighting measure, but as a tool of psychological pressure and blackmail. Putin has used nuclear signaling repeatedly throughout the Ukraine war. He will use it in the north too. But here is the critical reality that all of these options share. They are asymmetric. They are tools of harassment and pressure, not conquest. The reason Russia is resorting to shadow fleets and GPS jamming instead of marching troops across a border is precisely because the physical option has been taken off the table. Finland didn't just close a border, It forced Russia into a much weaker strategic position, where its remaining tools are all tools of desperation rather than dominance. And there is one final truth that puts all of this into perspective. Russia is currently consuming enormous military resources in Ukraine. Its ground forces, its artillery, its logistics, its air power, all of it is engaged, depleted, and under constant pressure. The 80,000 troop buildup project in the north that Russia was planning has run directly into the wall of that reality. There is no spare capacity for a major conventional military adventure in Scandinavia while Kyiv is still fighting. Finland's timing was not accidental. The Helsinki government watched, calculated, and moved at exactly the moment when Russia's ability to respond with overwhelming force was at its lowest point in decades. That is not luck. That is strategic brilliance. What Finland has done will be studied in military academies for generations. A country of 5.5 million people, with a painful history it never forgot, looked at the map of Europe and made a decision that every major power in the world noticed. It did not ask for permission. It did not wait to see if the threat would materialize. It looked at the trajectory and acted. The 1,340-kilometer border is now a wall of steel, sensors, soldiers, and political will. Behind it, NATO's northern flank is more unified and more capable than at any point in the post-Cold War era. In front of it, Russia's military planners are staring at a map and realizing that their calculations for the Northwest are going to need to be completely rewritten. Putin spent years building pressure points along Finland's border, massing troops, organizing hybrid operations, constructing garrison cities, planning for a northern option. All of that investment is now facing a return of almost zero. The quiet countries of the North, countries that are often overlooked in global news, countries that don't shout, that don't escalate unnecessarily, that measure everything twice before they act, have just delivered one of the most decisive strategic blows of the entire post-Ukraine security restructuring. They didn't fire a shot. They just closed a door. And that door may never open again. This is what real deterrence looks like. Not threats, not speeches. A 1,340-kilometer answer written in steel and silence. Before you go, here's a challenge for you. If this video made you think differently about something, even just one thing, screenshot the moment and share it on your social media. Tag it. Start a conversation. Because the more people understand what's really happening at these borders, the better all of us can make sense of where Europe is heading. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time. New deep dive content goes up regularly, and you don't want to miss what comes next.